Yeah, I'm not representing any organisation. I'm just representing myself here today. Sarah Benson and Nusha contacted me and asked me to go meet them to talk about this, which I did. I was intrigued just to talk about it. My own kind of knowledge of prostitutes as a kid growing up would have been around the Monto in Dublin, which of course was the Redlight district at the back of the now Department of Education, which of course was a British Army garrison at that time. And as a kid, you know, everybody was always looking for the books that did sex and talked about sex. So Joyce's Ulysses, the Nighttown sequence in Joyce's Ulysses, was a book that would have been passed around with things marked in it and so on. It just so happens that today is James Joyce's birthday, 2nd of February. I happen to know that because it's also my daughter's birthday. She's not called Joyce. I had the naming rights on her and I call her Nuala. In fact, it's also the publication date of Ulysses because Joyce believed his birthday was so important that it was only on his birthday that the great book could be published. So it was first published in 1922 on this day, 91 years ago. So my sense, you know, as most kids growing up, is that, you know, that Dublin had famously this Redlight district way back, and that the Catholic Church closed it down was the kind of common mythology that I grew up with. And there was some truth in that. The Monto itself lasted for over 100 years. And of course, as I got older and got interested in things like literature and writing and songs, I began to think about places like the Monto and do a little bit of research. And I certainly know that at the first cabinet meeting of the first Free State government, it was discussed. Because Frank Duff, the founder of the Legion of Mary, was a friend of Costello's, and they were appalled by the existence of this Redlight district, which by that stage in the early 1920s had gone from being a kind of a sophisticated 19th century thing where gentlemen came from the country for their prostitutes to being a really denigrated, most of the girls were meth addicts by that stage, the equivalent of kind of heroin addicts of today, and the whole thing had become incredibly grubby and so on. And I remember one particular kind of song that used to go around in my head was that song Dicey Riley. Christy would know it, poor old Dicey Riley. Now Dicey Riley was a prostitute who worked the Monto. I didn't discover that until I was kind of an adult, and I went back and looked at the lyrics of the song. And of course, if you know the whole song, later on she talks about long years ago when men were men and fancied May Oblong, who was a woman who lived in Railway Street, or lovely Becky Cooper, or Maggie Mary Wong. Extraordinary, was a Chinese prostitute working in the Monto back in the 1920s. So the song talks about prostitution and, you know, what happens to a woman at the end of it. So that was my first sort of engagement with that whole notion of prostitution and prostitutes in Ireland and the Catholic Church. And so I grew up in a thing of, David referred to it, kind of a liberal attitude of why should I tell people how to live their lives? If a man wants to engage with a prostitute and it's an equal thing between two consenting adults, that's none of my business to be prescribing what that person should do. That would have been my general kind of woody perception of kind of this business or whatever it was. And so when I was contacted about it, I was kind of interested in engaging with the question, maybe at a deeper level. Of course, within 5 minutes of meeting the girls, I realised that my thinking was so woody, so unfocused, so ill-informed, that it's not a contract between, you know, I think, you know, for me, sort of looking at this, I'll be thinking about my own journey, my own kind of education in the past couple of weeks, looking at this is, I probably represent the average kind of guy, which is, you know, if the girl, if there's an engagement between somebody that you're paying somebody for, and it's a free and consenting thing between two adults, then it's nobody's business but the two people involved. But unfortunately, that's not how it is. And even the most cursory examination of it, as soon as you pull back the scab, you realise that, of course, that's not how it is, and that it actually is a form of slavery. So, and I think that we need to get men to think about this. We really need to attack where men are coming from, because I think to engage in it, a man has to suspend his normal thing. He has to suspend his normal judgment in order to justify it in his own head, most men. Because if you knew the real nature of it, you couldn't. How could you in the 21st century engage in a 19th century activity of enslaving somebody? It's a form of slavery. And I love the thing, you know, of using this idea that women are for sale. It's pretty frightening when you think about it in those terms, that it's not the sex that's for sale, it's the woman that's for sale. And that it's actually our modern form of slavery. And that we need to get men to rethink their whole attitude towards the sexual encounter of a man with a prostitute. I think that's at the key to all of this, because I think a lot of us are really, really woolly around it and unfocused, and we really need an education process where we put it out there and really get men to think at a much deeper level about what's going on in the nature of the engagement between you and a prostitute. And I think if we do that, we could start to make some inroads into getting rid of this really awful situation that so many women find themselves in. And I'm totally delighted to be able to lend whatever little support I can. As a father of 2 girls, you know, and people talked about that, and you would just be horrified to think that your children could in some way be lured into this, or trapped into this, or involved in this in any way. So as a father, and just as a guy, a liberal guy, who doesn't want to tell anybody how to live their lives, I 100% endorse this campaign. Thank you.